Happy holidays. Lovely to see some of you again and say hello to the people I haven't met before. Excuse me. My name is Laura. My name is Laura Stec. I'm a chef based in Portola Valley. I work privately as a chef, and I also have a whole corporate wellness program that goes out and teaches in the Apples and the Googles of the world. I do some product consulting. I write for the local newspaper. I have a column called The Food Party and the Mountain View Voice, the Palo Alto Weekly, and the Menlo Park Almanac, and the Pleasanton Daily, I think is what it's called. So the talk is an adjustment talk. In 2009, we did one on money, right? Wasn't it on money? Where's that gentleman? Where did he go? So I hope there's nothing in this talk that was in that talk, and maybe there is, I'm not sure, but I'm sure people don't remember it anyways, so we'll find out how it goes. And please excuse the adjustment. We had some technical difficulties. I have a new computer and didn't even think about all the new cords you have to adjust the new computer to the new thing. So that's my bad. This presentation is based, let's see, what are we doing? Are we going this way? Yeah, on my book, Cool Cuisine, Taking the Bite Out of Global Warming. Came out in 2008, co-written with Dr. Eugene Cordero from San Jose State University, atmospheric scientist. We proposed that global warming could be the best thing to happen to the culinary world in a long time. And also, we take information from this presentation from the Culinary Institute of America, which I studied at, some of the conferences that happened there in association with Harvard University and the nutrition department there, and other sources as well. Okay, does anyone remember this graphic? No, good, okay. So we're going to go on a little tour of the United States of America and our standard American diet, which of course the acronym is SAD, and the obesity trends of our country from 1986 to 2015. And so here we see, these are obesity trends. This is, the CDC has come out with this map. Anything in white has no data. Anything in light blue is 10% of the population or less is considered in that state to be obese. And obese is registered as 30% of 30 pounds overweight, basically. And then the darker blue would be anyone that has 10 to 14% in that state of the population is obese. And let's see what happens as we move through the years. All right, so now we enter into a new 15 to 19% of the population in that state is considered obese. New category, 20% of the population. Another new category, 25% of the population. We're only on 2003. New category, 30% of the population. Interesting how it always starts in the South, right? Now the map's going to change a little bit because they just changed, the CDC changed. So let's look, from 2010, here we are, to 2012. It changes, but we can still get the idea of what's happening. I think that's the last one they had. So it's interesting. Colorado was the holdout. And then when we think about that...
How do they collect the data?
CDC?
Yeah.
I can't tell you exactly, but probably from statistics of hospitals and things like that. Yeah, so here's a squirrel sitting on a psychiatrist's chair, right? When I learned you are what you eat, I realized I was nuts, right? I mean, how has this occurred, right? Why has there been such a dramatic change from the 80s to now in our ability to be able to control our weight? There's definitely some problems, and Harvard University would say there are 3. Now, we don't, unfortunately, with our current way we're doing this, I don't have all the beautiful animation, but at least we can get the idea that there are 4 main dietary problems per Harvard Department of Nutrition, and those include, you and I eat too much meat in the United States, we eat too much salt, we eat too many refined carbohydrates, too much white flour, too much white sugar, and we eat too much in general.
What's the last one again?
We eat too much in general. We eat too much. We eat too much meat, we eat too much salt, we eat too many simple sugars, and we eat too much. These are the 4 main problems for the average eater in the United States. So here is a chart that shows what we're hopefully aiming to eat and what you and I are actually eating. And we'll notice here in the bottom, calories from what they say SOFAs are solid oils, fats, and sugars, right? These are added sugars, solid fats, refined grains, sodium, saturated fat, way too much of all of that. Over the limit, and of course the goals of whole grains, vegetables, fruits, we don't even achieve. So we can see we're basically eating too much junk food. And this is a chart that shows basically where our calories come from. And we can see the fats and the proteins, and half of it is coming from grains of some sort. So carbohydrates. So if we look closer into this red part of the chart, where our carbohydrates are coming from, and this is, we can see an interesting chart. Now this is an old chart, unfortunately. This is again from Walter Willits, who's the head of public health at Harvard. He doesn't have a new chart, so it is old data. But this is basically when we think about, okay, so we're eating all these carbohydrates, right? Half of our diet is carbohydrates. What are we eating? And it's probably worse. We'll notice as we look down this list of the average things that people eat, where our calories are coming from, that most of it's coming, carbohydrates are coming from French fries, right? Potatoes. And really the only thing healthy on the list is beer. Yeah, at least there's hope somewhere. So we all know in the country that we eat too much sodium, too much salt. 77% of what the salt that you and I eat comes from, anybody want to guess? Processed foods. And the highest contributor, so that means somebody cooking for you, right? Not you at home saying, I can't add salt to the dish. That's not where your salt is coming from. Your salt is coming from what you eat out, or what you eat from the deli, or what you eat from the frozen foods or the packaged foods, right? And then the majority of salt within that somebody else is making me food category. Does anyone know where I think the answer is even here. No, it's that. Yeah, the biggest contributor of food to that problem is bread, is processed bread of, whether it be a chip or a cracker or a bagel or a cookie. And that's because not only do we add sodium in baked goods for salty taste, we add it for the way that it interacts with the yeast. It's a texture addition as well. So what we learned here, of course, is that if you have an issue with sodium, you need to stop eating food that other people are cooking for you. And a little bit of sodium at home goes a long way. But one tip is if you're using Morton salt and kosher salt, or maybe you're using one or the other. Kosher salt is the red box salt. Morton salt, of course, I think we all know that a teaspoon or a tablespoon or anything of Morton salt is double that of kosher salt. Does anyone have any idea why?
Well, sodium is sodium, for God's sake.
Right, exactly. Why would it be double the amount to use Morton salt? Smaller granules. Yeah, so if you're baking, say for instance, and you add a teaspoon of salt to something, you might consider using kosher salt now, because you'll actually add half the salt and it still does fine. Okay, so what do we say? I trained at the Culinary Institute of America. That's the building that was spared the fires, thank goodness, up in St. Helena, as well as back on the East Coast, one of the main, in fact, I think it's the main culinary school in, I would say, the world. And there's always conferences where people come in and talk about different things, and so the data from this is coming from a company called Technomic. People actually are very good at studying how you and I eat, what you and I want, what you and I are trying to do, right? There's all kinds of studies out there. And so basically, what we say is, 3/4 of us want healthy choices at the supermarket. Half of us want healthier choices when we go out to eat. 2/3 of us claim that we have healthy eating habits. And 3/4 of us know that if we talk about health in our families, it increases awareness. We understand that. But what we actually do is very different. So only 1/4 of us choose eating healthy when we go out. 1/5 of us eat breakfast 5 or more times a week. 1/5 of us eat a healthy lunch. 37% a healthy dinner. And only half of us talk to our kids about nutrition and health. So we do exactly the opposite of what we say we want to do. And what motivates us as eaters and shoppers? So the studies show that there are 4 main things that motivate you and I when we go to the grocery store and when we think about our day-to-day life and food. And it's interesting to note, and this is one of the things in my book, Cool Cuisine, per USDA, that the average woman spends about a 3-month full-time work week per year thinking about what they're going to be eating, going out to shop for it, cooking, cleaning, right? It's a 3-month full-time job every year, the average woman, with children age, of course, and the average man, it's about a 2-month job, full-time. So we spend a lot of time thinking about this, and yet we're still falling short. And the things that motivate us when we're thinking about what we're going to cook and what we're going to buy is how much time do we have? What's it going to cost me? Who am I cooking for? And what are my values around food? And that's a larger topic we're going to look at this morning. And the values include things like, do I value the taste of things? Do I actually, some people eat and they don't even care what it tastes like, which is interesting. Do I value my health? What are my skills? Do I know how to operate in the kitchen? What does my culture say about food? My ethnicity, how does that affect my choices? What do I think about the environment? And am I interested in eating things that are healthy for the environment? Am I interested in food safety? Am I interested in social justice? This all fits under the topic of values. So let's look at the values a little closer, and let's look at the environmental values associated with food. And this is coming from my book, Cool Cuisine, Taking the Bite Out of Global Warming. It's good to start any type of a book about food and global warming with a recipe. And so this is a recipe for a gallon of gas. And in order to make 1 gallon of gas, you need 196,000 pounds of plants, roots, leaves, everything that you can possibly cram into into a big hole in the ground, say, and I need to take all that 196,000 pounds and push it down 6,500 feet into the Earth's crust, and I'll cover it with a large rock and set my kitchen timer for 1,000,000 years and come back and remove that rock, and I have the makings for 1 gallon of gas. Now, those 4 main problems with us: we eat too much meat, we eat too much salt, we eat too much refined carbohydrates, and we eat too much in general. So it turns out that as much as it's giving us a problem, it's giving the planet a problem, and it's giving our animals a problem. So what we do know is that the foods that are healthiest for us are also healthiest for the planet and the animals. And here's a good example. So, you and I salt food because we don't know how to season otherwise. Most of us really have. In fact, how many people in here have ever taken a cooking class? All right, so I'd say about 1/3 from what I could tell, and that's usually what it is. It's 1/3 to 1/4 of any group of us that's ever taken a cooking class. And here we are at this age. So cooking and eating is interesting. It's something we do 3 times a day, and yet most of you don't know anything about it. You've never had any training about it at all. Maybe your parents taught you something, but they probably didn't take a cooking class either, right? Where has cooking and eating escaped us? Something we do 3 times a day. If you played golf 3 times a day, you'd have the best equipment. You'd be part of a club. You'd have the right shoes. You would read things in the periodicals, right? You would take private lessons. It's like, where has something that we do so often escaped us? Cooking is no different than any other action. The more we know, the more better we're going to be at it. But sometimes we have just forgotten to spend some time on this. So salt is the easiest thing, right? I don't know how to season other than salt, so I put salt on everything. Well, unfortunately, that's causing you a problem, and it's also causing an issue, in a sense, for the planet, because we're not thinking about our soil as the first part of seasoning our food any longer. We don't think of the soil like a fine Bordelaise sauce, where what we put in that soil is going to end up with a better flavor. Now what we do in the global warming diet is just to use fossil fuel fertilizers to grow our food very quickly. Don't care about the soil really as a medium at all. It's really the nitrogen-based fertilizers, which of course fuel the global warming diet, that grow our food. And so if we start to think about the simple basic thing about putting compost back in the soil, realizing the soil has value, then we can start movement towards better tasting food. Why does the food at the farmer's market taste better than the food that you get from Safeway? Well, one of the reasons is because the soil is the beginning of that process of taking care of the soil. And if with this picture, we see the difference between soil that has 1% carbon compost in it and 5%, just a 4% difference. We can see a dramatic difference in what we would say is, gosh, the soil on the left-hand side looks rich. It looks like it's got something in it, something that we can derive from it, something the plants can pull things from. And it's very little difference with added carbon, added compost, added potato skins, and banana peels that we can add to have that effect. And of course, what happens when we add those seasonings to the soil, when we add our carrot peels to the soil, what happens is that we're offering food to the bugs that live in the soil. This microbiome that we don't even understand, right? You and I are covered in bugs, right? We're more them than us. We have 70 to 90% of the genes of other species. So not only are they all over me and you, but they're all over the soil. And when we add food to it, we add bugs to the soil. And the statistic is that in a healthy tablespoon of soil, there are 1 billion microorganisms. And so the idea that somehow we're missing that because we're using fossil-based fertilizers instead. We're not seasoning our soil. We don't know how to do it. We've lost the ability to do it, like you and I don't really know how to do it with our food. Also from the book, a chart from my co-author, Dr. Eugene Cordero, just looks at the auto diet comparison. So we're always, I don't see them on the road anymore, which is interesting. Hummers. Oh no, there's no Hummer here. But at Ford, there's talk of everybody driving to reduce your carbon footprint. Reduce your driving, drive a smaller car, drive a Prius. But if you look at this chart and kind of squint your eyes, the connection between how much CO2 is created by these 3 vehicles is basically very similar to how your diet falls if you're a high meat eater, a medium meat eater, or a low meat eater. In fact, you see some guy out on the street in a Hummer, and you may be saying, oh, that guy doesn't care about the environment, but maybe he's a vegan. And so he may actually have less effect on the CO2 emissions than you do, just because of his diet. So think about that the next time you're going to complain about that F-Series Ford truck. Now this is one of those animation slides that's all confusing because we can't see the animation, but basically, you and I are eating too many refined carbohydrates, and it's causing us a lot of inflammation and problems. It's causing the same thing with the planet. It is about when the book came out, 22 billion pounds of fertilizers and 2 trillion pounds of pesticides that we put on our food in the United States of America, or on our grain, predominantly on the grains that feed our cows, in order to fuel this whole global warming diet. And 22 billion pounds of fertilizers is hard to imagine. Like, it sounds like a big number, but what is it? So what it is if I had a big pile of 22 billion pounds of fertilizers, I would have equivalent to 18.3 million cows all piled up together. That's how much 22 billion pounds of fertilizers, because the average cow is 1,200 pounds. And it just was like, are you kidding me? That's what we put every year onto our food, onto our grains to feed the global warming diet. Not only are all these grains that we're eating and the cows that we eat along with it giving us problems, it's totally wreaking havoc with the planet as well. And this is just an interesting chart that talks a little bit, that just shows kind of the money. So the money aspect of it. So why does a salad cost more than a Big Mac? Well, it just so happens that what our government now, you know, the Farm Bill's coming up, 2018. Actually, I'm starting a study group, Farm Bill Cafe. If it ain't fun, it don't get done. It's like a Farm Bill book group. It's going to happen around the Portola Valley area to follow the efforts of the next Farm Bill, which is the major piece of legislation that rules so much of what you and I eat and don't eat. Subsidies for farms, school lunch program money, anything to do with money to the food system. It happens every 4 years. It's coming up in 2018, and it hasn't been since the 50s that the Republicans have held all 3 branches of government during the passage of the Farm Bill. So it's going to be a very serious discussion, and heaven help us with all the things that are happening now with the country. Not only that, but the food system is going to be affected. So if you're interested in having a little fun learning about the Farm Bill, we're a group. Talk to me afterwards. But you know, the Farm Bill, USDA tells us what to eat and gives us recommendations, and it also subsidizes the efforts to do that. So if you look at this chart, what they tell us to eat is on the left-hand side, but what they fund is on the right-hand side. Right? So they tell us to eat more vegetables and grains, but they fund the grains that feed cows. And it's Looney Tunes, and it's probably going to get worse with this upcoming Farm Bill. So this is one of the problems with this, and one of the answers of why a salad costs more than a piece of meat. So what is our motivation? What is our motivation as we move through this thing called life? And cooking for taste. First off is taste. You know, the average adult, and certainly the average child, is really not motivated by health. You know, kids aren't motivated, but don't talk to your kids about health if you've got young kids or if you've got grandkids, because kids aren't sick. So kids don't even know what health is because they're healthy, right? But for adults, it's the same thing. There was just a study that happened on Stanford University's campus. It happened in the cafeterias. It was not a structured study. Nobody knew that they were there were signs that said, when you walked into the cafeteria, you may be part of a study. And the study is they took a same dish, say green beans, and they called it one day healthy green beans, and the next day something like zingy green beans or active green beans, and one day caramelized green beans. And they just wanted to study how much green beans sold each time. They called it something that referred to health. It was the same dish, something that was kind of health, something that was more active, and something that was succulent and decadent. And turns out that, sure enough, anytime you call a dish by something that we appealed to people by the taste of it, caramelized, candied, we eat more of it. It's the same dish. So we're not motivated by health, first off. But we're also certainly motivated by our tongue. Our tongue is kind of like a computer, and if you look at it, these are the different places when you eat that you're affected. So sweet's right on the top of our tongue. The reason we're really attracted to sweet, one, because it's the first thing that we taste. On the sides, we're getting more towards salty and bitter and sour, and then in the back, salty and sour, and in the back is bitter. So it's interesting when we look about taste, how things are affected. And not only are so the junk food industry and the food industry in general knows this. right? They know very much about how you and I are attracted to food. And there is so much more information now about how that's affecting our brain. We can be addicted to many things. The opioid crisis is certainly a crisis. But my goodness gracious, don't half of us die because of our diet, is the statistic? Right? So we're all considered, oh my gosh, we're all addicted, or people are all addicted to opioids. Well, how about to sugar, right? So how about to meat, how about to fat, and to extreme salt? So it's no different, your addiction. What happens in an addiction, from my lay chef's perspective point of view, is you start turning on areas of your brain. You start turning on parts of your brain that light up and make you want to have that next pain pill or have that next drink or whatever. It hits an area of your brain. Well, sugar and salt and fat do the same thing, guess what? And what they do is they hardwire areas of your brain. So just like any kind of drug, once you get into a habit of, a cookie, say chocolate chip cookie, or a shot of cocaine, right? It goes to the same area of the brain. And so it turns out that just thinking about these things, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, money, or food, brings that pathway, just not tasting it, lighting it up, just thinking about it makes us want it. Right? So you pass the donut shop, you're saying, I don't want a donut, I don't want a donut, but the donut kind of drags you in. Why? It's because you already have a pathway to making that happen. So another way to say that is, our brain is a computer. It creates ways that just make things simple. So every morning when I get up and tie my shoe, my brain doesn't think about how to do it again. It already knows how to do it, and it just goes straight to that place, and I tie my shoe. Right? Same thing with the effect that I get from a chocolate brownie. And I can create that kind of just by thinking about it, just by smelling it. And so we are hardwired for habit when it comes to extreme things that hold our brain in these pathways. And the industry has it a name, gives it a name. It's called eatertainment. We're a lot of us are stressed and so many things, and not only do we have these pathways because our food is so highly salted and sugared and fat, but now we think we deserve it because the rest of our life is kind of stressful. So the food industry is encouraging these actions by giving us this type of eatertainment for us to enjoy. And one of the ultimate examples of this is what the industry calls vanishing caloric density, and it's exemplified by a Dorito. If we can get that exposure, again, back to that tongue, if I can turn on your sweet, your salty, your sour, and maybe your bitter, if I can at least sweet, salty, sour, if I can give you that, those salty, sweet chips or whatever, all this, and I can do it all at once, I can get that pathway to happen for you, and I can addict you to whatever it is I'm selling, and I don't care about your health, I just want to sell you food. And the ultimate way I can do that is if while you're eating, it vanishes in your mouth. And that's what a Dorito does if you think about it. If you put that Dorito in your mouth, you start chewing it, it touches the sweet and the salty and the sour, and you're like, well, and then it just disappears. So it's all of these interesting things that the food industry has done to make us perhaps have that increasing obesity like we've seen. And it is possible to rewire. And again, this is coming from a book from David Kessler. I don't know if this book is on here. No. The End of Overeating. You can achieve control over your brain. You do it by bringing awareness to what you're doing, trying to find a substitute action. You do it by realizing the difference. Like, does that cookie make me feel as good as I feel if I don't eat it? Or what does Kate Marth say? Nothing, the very skinny model says, nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. Right? So knowing the difference between those things. And then, and the pleasure of, that's the pleasure. And then the difference, are we eating for calories or are we eating for reward? So when you start putting your brain around these ideas, you can get out of these habits and to have hope that there are ways to get beyond that. And one of the best ways to do that is just to get regular habits of eating, sleeping, and exercise is one way that we can control that also. But then at the end, cooking is all about tips, and that comes down to the time factor that we're going to look at now. So cooking is all about tips. The more you know, the faster, the more delicious, the more creative your food and cooking will be. Again, 3/4 of you probably haven't taken a cooking class, and my question is, why not? So to start off with that time and taste culinary class, what we don't want to do with people, and this is my experience working with Kaiser Permanente for many years. I've been working with Kaiser since 2003. You know, you tell people to reduce their meat, and what do they say? What else do I eat? Right? Don't eat sugar. Don't eat junk food. You know, don't eat this, don't eat that. But most people don't know what to eat in general. So when you tell them not to eat things, it doesn't do any good. So don't tell people what not to eat. Tell people what to eat. You want to give people options. You want to teach them about the secrets of vegetables. The secrets of vegetables is that vegetables are sweet. And we're going to do a little cooking demo that will highlight the secrets of vegetables in just a minute. Don't tell people to not eat simple carbohydrates. Tell people to eat more whole grains and show them how to do it. So that's brown rice, yes, but it's also buckwheat and farro and quinoa and fonio and emmer and spelt and millet, and there's all kinds of grains out there. And not only is there all kinds of grains out there, there are many different ways that you can prepare them. So there are 3 stages of preparing a grain. And the first is stage 1, which probably most of you do not do, is you can take a raw grain and you can soak it or you can toast it. You can soak it maybe for digestive reasons. It does change the texture. And you can toast it. Well, why would you toast a raw grain? Well, why do you toast toast? It changes it. Stage 2 of cooking a grain. Most of us know we can put it in a rice cooker, or we can cook it what I would call steeping, 1 part grain, 2 parts vegetables on top of the stovetop. But did you know with these whole grains that you can pressure cook them? You can bake them in the oven. Did you know you can boil a grain like pasta? Why is that important? Well, you may not like millet steeped because when you steep millet, it turns out to be a big slab of bleh. But if you boiled it like pasta, 8 parts water, 1 part grain, put it in, boil it for 10 minutes, you get a whole different thing. And it's good. So knowing that the different techniques and which grain you like cooked in which way is one of the ways you'll start eating more whole grains. You know, it's important for us to eat carbohydrates. Our brains run on carbohydrates. Of course you crave carbohydrates. That's how you think. Unfortunately, your carbohydrate choice is white flour, white sugar, right? Chips, processed foods. So get your carbohydrates from whole sources like grains and vegetables and put them more in your diet, and you might just crave the junk food less. The book has a chart, all these different grains, all the different ways you can cook, the amounts of water, the amounts of time, because the different cooking technique changes the amount of time and the amount of water that you would use. So that's a very good chart. You can certainly take a picture of it in the book, or I can send it to you if you want. And this is where we're going to do a little quick culinary demonstration. So this is kind of a second, a last minute thought. I brought in one of my little stoves. And we're going to talk about the secret of vegetables. Now, when I do corporate demonstrations, we've got cameras and stuff over the food. So if you're having wellness fairs or anything, I'm the best in culinary entertainment out in Silicon Valley. So Pinterest calls me. But so whether you're corporate or whether you're a 5th grade class, we start off with a quick cooking demonstration by saying that vegetables have secrets. And the secret of vegetables is vegetables, say if you were of one of my classes, and I do come out to schools and teach for free if I can, so you can always hit me up. The secret of vegetables is vegetables are sweet. Pass it on. And it would go all the way around the room when we get to Brian in the end. And when I would ask Brian, what's the secret of vegetables? And he would say, vegetables are sweet. And I don't have an onion, but if I had one, I'd say, vegetables are sweet? This onion is sweet, right? No. But if I took an onion and cut it up and start to saute it, what would happen? What would happen? It would turn sweet, right? Right? And why? Because vegetables are made of carbohydrates. And carbohydrates, whether it's in an onion or any other vegetable, because all vegetables are primarily carbohydrates, all carbohydrates caramelize, it's science, at a temperature of 330 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. So, are you smarter than a fifth grader? What temperature does water boil at? 212, there's a science guide. Most adults don't remember. Water boils at 212 Fahrenheit, 100 Celsius, but secrets come out at 330 Fahrenheit, or about 166 Celsius. So 212, 330, 212, 330, if you boil and steam all your vegetables, your temperature won't get hot enough to bring out the secret. What's the secret? It's sweet. What temperature does it take? 330 or higher. Grill, roast, broil, or saute. Okay, so when it comes to time, and you think you have a hard time motivating yourself to cook dinner, think about somebody who cooks all day, right? I don't want to cook when I come home. So this is basically what I do. For the most part, when I'm just cooking basics, when I'm coming home, I have whatever vegetable that I either got from the farmer's market, I have to use up, whatever. I cut them small. I cut vegetables small because the smaller a vegetable is, the more surface area touches the heat, which means it caramelizes more. Also, small vegetables, or what I call vegetable confetti, you have a tendency to eat more of them. You go to the salad bar at Whole Foods, you put all the vegetables in, you put the cauliflower and the broccoli because you're doing the right thing, you put them into that box, you eat your lunch, you get to the bottom of the box, and what's at the bottom? The cauliflower and the broccoli. Why? Because they're big pieces. So now when I go to the salad bar, I take the cauliflower into small pieces. And I eat the whole salad, right? So smaller vegetable, you might just eat more. Okay. So I have small vegetables, and I put them in my pan. I add my oil. It's totally fine to saute with extra virgin olive oil with the smoke point of 375 to 400. I want to mix my whatever vegetable it is up in my pan, flatten it out, and have the guts to put down the spoon and walk away. Why? Because the place where the secret comes out is the place where the vegetable touches the pan. And if the vegetable doesn't touch the pan, because you stand over it like most people do, you stand by your pan and you stir. And you just stir because you're sauteing, and you just keep stirring and stirring. You don't know why you're stirring, right? You just keep stirring. No, stop stirring. Let the vegetable touch the pan. This is science. It needs to touch that heat so that it can caramelize. So give it a chance to do it. We burn the hell out of our meats, but with our vegetables, we hardly turn the heat up. We just No, turn the heat up, medium high, open the windows, turn on the fan, get this process happening. Caramelization is something that you want to happen. You want those vegetables to turn a little brown. And when I'm stirring, if I leave my pan kind of like this, where I can't really say, but kind of not flattened out, but kind of in like that, then the vegetables on the pan will be caramelizing, but the ones on top will be steaming, right? So make sure you flatten it out. You want to see some brown. Now, I grabbed the wrong pan. So seasoning lesson number 1 is caramelize your vegetable. All vegetables have carbohydrates. All vegetables can caramelize. Seasoning lesson number 2. When you cook vegetables, they lose a layer of clothes to the pan. And the French thought this was so important, they gave it a name. Does anyone know? And again, I took the wrong pan. It's a dark pan. This is a non-stick pan. It's wrong. You want things to stick to the bottom of the pan. That's a good thing. And there is actually a name for the brown stuff that sticks to the bottom of the pan. Does anyone know what it's called? It's called fond, F-O-N-D, or if I was French, it would be fond, right? Fond. And this is the dehydrated essence. Excuse me, this is a little bit off, so I keep on thinking I'm falling, so that's why I'm kind of doing that. But it's the dehydrated essence of what you're cooking. And it is what they call the culinary gold. And if you have it onto the pan, and then you just remove your stuff from the pan and then wash your pan, you're doing a grave disservice. And then the dead French chefs are rolling around in their graves, right? You want to pick that stuff up and put it back into your food. That's where your flavor is. You want stuff to stick, and then I want to put it back up into my food. Now, I think that's the end of my canister because, let me see if I have no more heat. Yeah, well, okay, this is definitely, so I can't do my cute little thing, but we'll see. So anyways, with a pan on medium-high, with fond that has stuck to the bottom of the pan, I want to do seasoning lesson number 2, which is deglaze my pan. Deglaze my pan, which is take some liquid, pour it into the pan, and allow that fond to come back up into the pan. I can use stock, I can use wine, I can use coconut water, I could use olive juice. It doesn't matter what I use to make this process happen. I need a liquid, I could use water, but water has no flavor. And it doesn't matter the liquid, it will change the outcome and flavor, but the most important thing is how much I add. Because I don't want to add so much to my pan that my vegetables start to boil in like a soup, right? Because then, science, my temperature drops back down to 212, and now I'm boiling my vegetables. I'm not having that 330 or higher. So what you want to do, and again, I don't have any more fuel left, which is terrible. We can't have that. Let's see if maybe I can get just a little bit more from my last fuel. I doubt it, but we can see if we can get anything more. Yeah, it's out. So I've got the fond in the bottom of the pan, I've got my pan on medium-high, and I add enough stock or wine or water in different areas of my pan to just, not a bunch that makes it go boiling, but just enough over there and you'd see the things boil up, and then some here and they would fly up, and then some a little bit here would fly up, and then I remove that fond and it transfers onto my food. And I have seasoned my food without any seasoning by seasoning lesson number 1, caramelizing my vegetable. Seasoning lesson number 2, deglazing my pan. Now I can add salt or anything else I want to add as far as the seasoning goes. And in fact, what I'm teaching now in corporate is the sheet called Easy Seasoning. It's the Easy Seasoning handout, which is salt and pepper with a college education. It's combinations of foods that go together very quickly. I'm going to leave this up on my computer. You can come and see it if you want to just kind of check it out. But the idea is if you have a list of things that go together as fast as salt and pepper do, which is what this list really is, then you can cook fast. You can come home with no recipe, whatever is in your refrigerator, and just saute it up and add a quick sauce, and then you might add in a little bit of protein, you might add a little bit of carbohydrate, whether it be a noodle or a grain. So this is the way to cook fast. This is the way to cook every day, and then this is the way that I cook. So again, I'm going to leave this little handout up on my computer. You can come look at it, and if you send me an email, I can send you the handout as well. It's also on my website. And the last thing I want to say about cooking and tips, and I guess I'm good, right? I'm going to end at noon, that's a good time, is about sharpening a knife. Most people don't have sharp knives because why would you? No one's ever taught us how to sharpen a knife. I mean, we think, oh, we sharpen a knife, so we're actually going to sharpen it. But no, actually, that's not the way to keep your knife sharp. If you want to keep your knife sharp, you do not sharpen it, but to times a year. But what you do, and with the holidays, this is a wonderful, I'm going to solve all of your Christmas problems, present problems with this next thing, because what you do to keep your knife sharp is you go over to that knife block they gave you when you got married or you graduated from college. They gave you that block of knives. You've pulled everything out of that block of knives since you got it, except for one thing you've never pulled out. Tonight you go home, you pull that thing out. It's called a steel or a honing stick. And an 8-inch larger chef's knife and a honing stick go together. Now, I've got 11 $5 chef knives here, which are perfect gifts for, if you're going to put them in the Christmas stocking, make sure that you cover it up. They're very sharp. I use cheap knives and expensive cookware. I cook with $5 knives now, one because I have chef's elbow, which is like tennis elbow, but it's for cooks, and I can't hold anything heavy, so these are very light. Also, I can keep them sharp only on a steel, which is funny because they're cheap metal. So it doesn't matter if you have an expensive knife or a cheap knife. What you need to do to keep your knife sharp is for every half hour you use it, for every half hour of cutting time, I'm going to steel my knife. I'm going to pull that honing stick out, and I'm going to do this process. I'm going to take my knife at a 20-degree angle. So 90, 45, 20, and from the back of the knife to the front of the knife, I'm going to go down 10 times. Then I'm going to move to the other side of the knife, back of the knife to the front of the knife, 20-degree angle, 10 times. Back to the first side, 5 times. 5 times the other side, 2 times, and alternating sides 10 times.
Let you on the airplane with them?
Yes, you can. Now what this does is there are microfibers on your knife that bend over, and in order to keep them sharp, you have to straighten them back up again. And you do that by the process of honing your knife. You can do that like this. You could do it like this. You can do it like this. It doesn't matter. They're microfibers. The idea is you do it. You do it for every half hour you use your knife, which means if it takes you 15 minutes each night to cut dinner, you sharpen your knife or you hone your knife every other day. If it's Thanksgiving dinner and it takes you 6 hours to cook your meal, you're going to hone your knife 12 times during that day. Or it's not, it's not brain surgery. Maybe you do it 5 times, or maybe you do it once. But the important thing is you do it, and you realize that these two things go together. So an 8-inch or larger chef's knife, everyone should have, and it should be sharp. It can be cheap, it can be expensive, but it's a great little gift if you're looking for something, especially people that don't have any knives. And as far as a honing stick goes, if they don't have it, everyone should have one of these. If you have one from 25 years ago, you should get a new one, because in culinary school they tell us to get a new one every year. And they don't really recycle, so I get a new one every 2 years or so, but they wear out. So it's also a very good culinary gift to have. In fact, culinary gifts are a great thing to give to people this year, because most of us at this age have things we need. We don't really like gifts and people giving us things. So, if you give a culinary gift, people will often use it. So think about culinary if you're like, what am I going to buy for people for this year? All right, so so sharpen your knife, keep it sharpened. That's the way that you do it. In closing, what does this mean for us? I'll sum it up by saying eat these 3 foods 3 times a day. Whole grains, vegetables, and fruits. Try to figure out how to put those more into your diet. And thank you for coming. That's the end of our talk. We remember that the foods that are healthiest for us are also healthiest for the animals and the planet. So let's change the world with great tasting food, shall we? Together we can make a great meal and a great difference. Thank you.
I've got the microphone here. If there are any questions, just raise your hand, and I'll try to keep track of the questioners. Oh, and hold the microphone like that so that it's pointing at your mouth.
Very interesting talk.
Funny.
My wife and I used to have a house in Newark and I don't know whether I actually put your thing you said in practice, but I try to give her some healthy food. Now that she's over in Japan, and I'm in this place called Fremont Village, which is a place for old folks, both sexes. I eat whatever is put on my plate 3 times a day. And so I find like the meat is very chewy, it's hard to digest or at least chew on. And so I don't know whether they're using good practice or not, but that's the situation I'm in. And if you have any comments on that, I'd like to know.
Well, I think as far as educating other people in the values of either, health or a healthy planet, again, if you wanted to say make some changes in the kitchen, the bottom line again is to remember that people are motivated by health, people are motivated by pleasure. So think about suggesting to the kitchen that the goal or the trend is to eat more vegetables now, and most people boil and steam vegetables, and most commercial kitchens, many boil and steam them and serve them to us, but boiled and steamed vegetables don't bring out the secrets. So encourage them to start either sautéing vegetables, grilling vegetables more, bringing out that secret, bringing out those carbohydrates, because more people will eat more vegetables, and if they're offered to you that way, you'll find that you'll eat more too. And that's one thing I'd say. Yeah, please. Oh, I'm sorry, we've got a microphone.
Question about cooking with salt in the smallest degree. Is it true that putting a little tiny bit of salt, like 1/8 of a teaspoon, in when you're boiling an egg keeps the shell from cracking? Is there any reason to do that? Does it get into the egg and add salt to that?
I don't think that is your best bet. Your best bet to keep your shell from cracking is to put your egg into cold water and bring that up to almost a boil, not quite a boil. When you boil an egg... Oh, well, either way, put your egg into the cold water and bring it up to a boil instead of having, it should never boil. When you take an egg solidifies under the boiling point, under 212, so you don't even want to bring it to a boil. So put it in cold water and start that process. That's your best tip.
If I want to be a good girl and be more concerned about nutritional value than the taste,
okay,
what's which method of cooking preserves the nutritional value the best?
Well, raw versus cooked has been a conundrum in an eater's world forever. So do I all eat, if cooking influences vitamin C, should I not cook anything is a question. But, there are some vegetables or some elements in food, such as lycopene, that come out in a tomato, come out when you actually cook it. So some elements are more affected by heat, and some are actually are more ruined by heat, and some actually emerge with heat. That said, if I wanted to eat all raw, and because I was being the good girl, but I don't really get a lot of satisfaction out of that, then I'm kind of the begrudging eater, right? Oh, I'm going to eat all this food, it's healthy for me, but I don't really like it. And we find most often that people will then be unsatisfied, and the most common response is we run out at midnight to the Blueberry Buckle and get our hot fudge ice cream cake. So a little bit of oil, a little bit of salt, caramelize those vegetables, eat salads, balance between raw versus cooked. I think moderation of all of it is your best bet. Do not just motivate yourself only by health, because, again, different cooking styles will give you different effects to health. Some will bring out. And then you also may just eat more vegetables if you add a little salt and add a little fat and caramelize that vegetable. and your chances are you're going to eat more. So moderation is my answer to that. Everything in moderation.
But if I'm going to cook, which method is the best, though, for, again, preserving
What are you going to eat? I mean, if you say, I'm going to steam a broccoli, but I only eat a quarter cup of it. Or I'm going to saute a broccoli and I'm going to eat a whole head. You know, it was interesting. I was just at the Culinary Institute a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about the protein or the amino acids in broccoli versus beef, which are very similar. And they were saying that in order to have the same kind of effect, they said that broccoli is very meat-like, which I think is true. You know, I'll eat a head of broccoli for dinner, sauteing it, and that's what I'll eat. Maybe a little tofu or even a little something on the side, ground meat. And what they said, what the speaker said is, well, you know, broccoli and beef have similar amino acid content, but you would have to eat 3 cups of broccoli in order to substitute what you would get from the average piece of meat. And they said, who would ever eat 3 cups of broccoli? And I'm like, me? You know? So would I eat 3 cups of steamed broccoli? No. Would I eat 3 cups of sauteed broccoli with a little salt on it? You better believe it. So it depends on what you like. There is no best, again, if I'm going to steam something, you know, air and water soluble vitamin C, for instance, is not the same as the lycopene, which is brought out by heat. So balance. It depends on what you like and what you're going to eat. There's really no holy way. I mean, you might say raw, but when you get into, you know, no cooking at all, but when you get into that, you know, the macrobiotics. So I trained at the Culinary Institute of America, School of Natural Cookery, Vega Macrobiotics Study Center. And the macrobiotics will say there's a whole element towards adding heat, not hot, but energy to food. So raw, they say in macrobiotics, is for breaking down, and cooked is for building up the constitution. So it depends on what your issue, you know, are you trying to clean out or are you trying to strengthen? And those are other things you got to think about when you're talking about cooking methods, to cook or not to cook.
A couple of points. Salt. Now, appears to me that the salt is actually enhancing the taste. It has nothing to do with obesity. All animals need salt, including us. Now, maybe we overdo it and it has some effect on our heart or something like that. But salt is, I think people misunderstand salt. As a salt is contributing to obesity, but it has nothing to do with that. Now, the second point I'd like to bring out is, in the case of potatoes, I understand that the elements that are really good for you is the skin.
Yeah.
And the rest of the potatoes, starch, which is really worth anything. So you make mashed potatoes and you're not getting any real nutrients. Now, is that the case with other things like fruit? Skins and all are more valuable.
Well, what I've heard is that, and I haven't heard any recent science on this, but that the majority of the nutrients lie right between the skin and the top of the vegetable. So when you peel it, you actually remove that layer of nutrients that's strong. So yeah, it's best to eat the skin, and definitely best to eat organic, because you know, a lot of the pesticides will hang out on the outside of the vegetable. So, you know, eat organic, buy organic, and then eat the skin. Yeah. And the thing about salt is, remember, with salt, you don't necessarily want a salt to have something taste salty. You want to salt something to have it taste more like itself. So that's the important thing about salt. Salt will heighten the flavor and make a food taste more like itself. That's what you're looking for. That, again, that seasoning without necessarily just making it taste like salt.
Yeah. So one other point. You know, my father was a candy maker. As a kid, I probably consumed more sugar than anybody on the planet. For example, we would help him set up for making taffy apples, which are caramel. So many times I've seen him make caramel, 10 pounds at a crack. Now, we kids would also dip our apples in the caramel. I would end up with something like a ½ an inch thick layer of caramel. Why I have any teeth left in my head, I do not know. But my 2 sisters and I, we're never overweight. and we consumed candy like nobody's business.
Right. Well, we do know within eating requirements that they say that we could have up to 50 times different nutritional requirements. So the science of nutrition is, they say our understanding doubles once every 18 months because studies keep coming out at that amount of time. The science of nutrition is still evasive to us. We don't really have a good grasp as much as we do about, say, evolution or sending people to the moon or whatever, right? We need more efforts in studying nutrition. But we know that there are variations within our own personal constitutions, and we also know, so that's one thing. Somebody could be affected by something and not affected by something else, which makes studying nutrition very hard because it is not a specific answer for everybody. And the other thing, one of the things that we're really learning, especially with the younger generation, which we did not know when you and I were growing up, is that there is this whole other world happening in our body, which is the microbiome. And the younger both in the soil and in our constitutions, and there is how our bacteria is affecting how we either digest food, what kind of allergies we have, what kind of effects we have, both from a nutritional point of view and also a psychological point of view. This is a whole new world that unfortunately our younger generation may not have as strong of a microbiome as the older folks do. So, this increase in problems with our health. I mean, my father ate like he was 5 until his death, and he died at 90, So also the quality of the food, the quality of the soil, it's all gone down. So the intensity of which the sugar is, maybe, the food science has gotten so good at cramming all the crap into, like things can be, it's not, natural sweeteners. It's all fertilizer, force-fed, phony food, most of the stuff that they feed us. So how is that affecting an early eater as compared to those of us who've already had a constitution that was set when food was still considered to be healthy? So, there's so many, who knows why, there's so many issues, yeah.
So,
I'm sorry.
You mentioned that there were a couple of ways of bringing out the sweetness. You didn't mention baking. Doesn't that baking vegetables, doesn't that also bring out the sweetness?
Yeah, I would say roasting. So anytime you get a temperature of 330 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, and certainly in the oven is a great place to do that. So remember, though, that the place where the secret comes out, whether in a pan or in a baking sheet, is the place where the vegetable touches the pan. So if you are roasting your Thanksgiving vegetables this week, and you are cooking a big dinner, and you have a pan of vegetables, but you have so many vegetables that you have kind of 2 layers, the bottom layer is going to caramelize, the top layer is going to steam. So make sure you use 2 pans, or you bake them twice, right? Same thing in a pan. If I've got so much vegetable when I'm sauteing that my vegetables really aren't touching the pan, all of them, then I need to have a larger pan, or I need to do it twice.
What about the heat of the pan? The problem is that they tend to burn really fast if you don't stir them. Is it you want to?
No, they don't burn very fast. Actually, I disagree. I think people are so scared about heat when it comes to vegetables. But if I would have had a heat, you'd be surprised. It doesn't.
A high heat you want?
Medium high.
Medium high.
Medium high.
And also, you were speaking about the skins, and it's true that it's a big problem with the pesticides on the skins, but probably something like a potato that's underground, various root crops, wouldn't have that problem, would they?
Oh, you're saying with pesticides and herbicides and things like that?
Yeah, the stuff that's on the outside that make people not want to eat the skin because they're afraid of the pesticide.
Well, I don't really have an answer to that. I think your question is, are things that grow underground less susceptible to pesticides and herbicides? And actually, that's never been asked to me before. Did anyone have an answer to that? The pesticides are all over in the soil and in the air. They spray on them. They put them in the soil. I don't really know if that would be true, but anyways, I know that the NRDC has, the National Resources Defense Council, has the top 10 worst foods and the top 10 best foods to eat, organic and non-organic. And I think the first one is strawberries, that you should always eat. Strawberries are anything with a thin skin is going to be one of the things that, so cherries, strawberries, as compared to, say, a potato or something like that that has a thicker skin. So lighter skin foods, definitely try to aim aim toward organic because they have a tendency,
This,
I guess, to have more concentration of pesticide.
This is the last question.
Yeah.
Hi, hello. Thank you. My name is Jan. I was 1 year the doctor intern in the hospital. So one thing about the fruit skin, especially this lady just mentioned the potato skin. I don't agree. Some about because. For example, we both have experiences when we eating the apple. Then some of apple, when we start cutting the skin, we figure out inside was bad. Some of because the skin is beautiful doesn't mean it's the under the skin is okay for the human being. So for that case, for safety reason, I think is cutting the skin is more healthy. For especially people if they have their patient or they are in the disease, they need help. We should be told that. I mean, my English is not very good enough to express what I want to say. I just want to say that truth is truth. We need to be honest to what we see in our life, in the real experiences. Because sometimes I saw the beautiful apple bought from supermarket. Now I start because my habit is to take off the skin. So when I see, oh, this is bad actually. So it's same like. Most of the things. So my experiences is to take off the skin. Also, my teacher do the same. So that's my point. And also, I suggest everyone. I'm not sure you watching the video on the TED. The TED.com. So TED.com they have one very famous doctor. His name is Dr. William. And I respect him a lot because he tells the truth and help people to learn about how to use the food to fighting the cancer. And Dr. William is very easy to find it. When you do TED.com, then you search about cancer, then you can find him. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess we're done. If we give you a round of applause.
Yeah, well, thank you.
And,